And we're live. Welcome back, everyone. Onan here and Midnight Philosopher. How are you today, Midnight?
I'm doing fine, thanks, Onan. Making up for my absence on Monday, and happy NFP Awareness Week.
Yay! I feel like the last couple of years, and I guess I've only been doing this for a couple of years. NFP Awareness Week snuck up on me, or actually, it falls around the time when my family is usually camping
Mm-hmm.
in kind of remote areas, and so I have not had a chance to share my true feelings about NFP during NFP Awareness Week, so I'm very excited about
Yeah,
this opportunity.
it's the appropriate time to get on your soapbox as a married man, father of 9, loyal husband. You got some hot takes.
Yeah, we'll see what people think of them, but
Mhm.
and it's funny. So right now we're in the tail end of the good time of the NFP, and so I'm probably not as cranky about it as I might normally be or am during the other time. So that's the only thing that's missing. I'm missing the 2 week abstinence agitation
Mhm.
behind things. So I'll do my best to channel my inner frustration and make sure that comes through so I don't give people the wrong impression.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? That's the downside with being a gooner. You're always just chill and relaxed. You don't have enough of that edge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So today so what we wanted to do today is talk about it's actually a reaction video. It's not necessarily clear from the title, but we actually wanted to do a reaction video. Um, there's this gentleman on Twitter. His name is I'm gonna butcher it, Eamonn Clark. I ran into him 3, 4, 5 months ago, something like that,
Mhm.
and I had never heard of him before, but he's not a married guy, I don't think, and from what I can tell, he's either former seminarian or trying to get into the seminary, and has a strong interest in NFP and sort of sexual morality and all that kind of stuff, and actually wrote a book that came out this week. I have um, I have gotten the book. It's an ebook. I've gotten the book. I have not had a chance to read it yet. I was really hoping to squeeze that in this week, but that didn't happen. But he gave a podcast interview with the guy over on Catholic Culture, which is a pretty decent sized podcast. He has 37,000 subscribers. What's his name?
I think it was like Thomas Miris
Mir-
or something like that. Yeah.
Myris or Miris or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, I had I had wanted to interact with them too about their episodes, but of course I'm blocked by both of them over on Twitter, so I can't.
Oh, I didn't realize you were blocked by Thomas. I know that I know Amon had blocked you and a few others.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I I f- I feel like to his credit, Eamon gave me a lot more leash before he blocked me, but I must not have had many interactions with Thomas before he
Mhm.
blocked me. So I don't even remember the circumstances that led to that block, but I
Mhm.
imagine I could probably piece it together.
Yeah.
Um, so, but Thomas Miras has a pretty good sized podcast. Like I said, 37,000 subscribers. I have been trying to figure out his state in life. Doesn't seem like he's a priest. Doesn't necessarily seem that he's married, but maybe he just hides all that. Like some people are just very private about that, and I get that. But I have not been able to find any evidence to determine that. You said somewhere in the episode he said he was unmarried. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. To paraphrase kind of the tail end of the episode, he had sort of thanked Amon for, writing the book and offering all of this stuff to reflect on. And he said something to the effect of like, as an unmarried man, this gives me clarity and what exactly I'm looking for if I aspire to be married. And
Hmm.
so he was kind of, yeah, he felt that as a single man, he was being given this like handbook and how to proceed with the sacrament of matrimony. So yeah, unmarried man sounds like he's open to being married.
Huh.
But it's always a fascinating thing when two unmarried men get together and start making these grand pronouncements about how marriage should proceed.
Yeah, and I mean, what do I want to say? I don't think that their opinions are, completely invalid or anything like that. But it's just interesting. I'm searching the transcript as we talk through here to see if I can find the section where he talks about his married state. If anyone that happens to see this either live or during, afterwards, finds out whether he's married. Let me see here. I'll post a I don't know if this will help much, but I'll post a link to uh, the video in the chat.
Mm.
But I would be curious, like I said, not because I think it means their opinions are relevant, but it would be interesting if this is two unmarried lake gentlemen talking about some pretty, I guess, some pretty important points. Pretty, I would say controversial, but I would say consequential points that they make if they truly don't have experience in any of these things.
Hmm.
So so anyway, and I want to say this too. They both seem to me to be pretty smart, pretty articulate. Like I don't think these guys are dummies. I mean, I think they carried on a pretty high level conversation, and I don't think that anything they said is what do I want to say, contrary to church teaching necessarily.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you. I think one of the things that I took away from the podcast, just on a surface level, is that Twitter really makes us all seem a lot angrier and bitter and more condescending than we actually are in real life conversation. Because I certainly had that impression of Amon, but he was a lot more like even keeled and soft
Yeah,
spoken, and even some of the things when he was discussing marital debt, which I still don't agree with the concept, especially
yeah,
not the Ripperger model. But he was actually very sympathetic in how he discussed it, and
yeah.
that certainly didn't come across in his like on his Twitter feed. So he seems like I'd like to believe he's a much nicer person, and I think if we can all chill out, I imagine he'd we could have a sensible conversation with him.
I think both of these guys are, from what I can tell, are very sincere and well studied on sort of these topics, especially with respect to sort of the to the traditional um, approach to things.
Hmm.
And I don't think I don't think the problem is necessarily with their um, opinions, conclusions, or whatever. I think it sheds light on the troubles, if you will, of these more traditional rules and ideas or opinions, depending on who you ask. Because I think these guys, for the most part, pretty fairly articulate the logical consequences of these notions that are baked into the history of our beliefs on these things.
Yeah. Um,
So, anything else you want to add before we maybe start
no, I think
diving
that
into it a little bit?
I think everything you said is fair. I do think that they I would certainly rank them higher than Father Ripperger. I mean, they're very close to how Father Ripperger characterizes
Hmm.
marriage, but they didn't quite have the same like demons everywhere frigidity that I associate with Father Ripperger. And in fact, I think one thing that was like really, no, I don't think they ever mentioned hell at all. So at least they sort of left
Hmm.
out that sort of typical rhetorical tool of do this, avoid this, or else you go to hell. Now they certainly mention venial sin, habitual venial sin, and mortal sin. So implicit in that is certainly putting your soul in jeopardy. But generally they kept the threats almost non-existent, which I think allows the conversation to really just kind of do a cost benefit analysis about the practical implications of these things without excommunicating or sending people to hell. So I think it's very important to leave threats off the table when we examine the benefits and the harms of whatever course of action we take in marriage.
I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, but I kind of I saw it a little different, just a little differently than that, because I think they one of the arguments that they made, and why I think Amon came out with his book, is they see troubles in how NFP and NFP culture is presented in the church. Um, and I think they're understandable. I mean, they sound like they understand why it happens, but they think it's a problem. But well, on the one hand, Eamonn and Eamonn is sort of, I don't know, can't please anyone because he's to the left, if you will, of, let's say, the John Farrells who think NFP is always immoral, can never be used. He in his book, I think, very clearly tries to make the case for why it is licit or can be licit. So
Mhm.
he's not in the camp of you can never use NFP. On the other hand, he seems to be of the position that NFP is overly used, overly promoted, and that in the sort of the I don't want to say the dialogue that takes place by, let's say, the bishops and all that, they're focused on just keeping people out of mortal sin territory, so that they rail against contraception, remind people, if you're going to do anything, it needs to be NFP. But he feels like they forget, and this is one of the points they make quite a bit, is there's all kinds of venial sin that you can commit within the context of marriage, with or without NFP, right? And so
Yeah,
I
absolutely. I think that's something we definitely gotta discuss in depth, like, the whole everything is a venial sin, that part
yeah,
was hugely problematic. Just, it's that Augustinian scrupulosity about the flesh and pleasure and stuff. It was just, yeah, I think you almost have to be a total robot, devoid of, devoid of any, sensuality, and yeah, it was kind of, that part was certainly very upsetting.
yeah, and it's I mean, I just find it, I would say, interesting, and this is kind of my ongoing where I have my beef with John Farrell is right now we can't even convince people with the current messaging, like with the current messaging being, more or less, hey, fine to use NFP, yeah, don't abuse it, don't have a contraceptive mentality, but for the most part, um, do use NFP, use your sense, and then enjoy the pleasure and all that, as long as the act finishes the right way. That's sort of the TOB mentality, and even that even that doesn't seem to generate widespread adoption of NFP by Catholics. I don't know what the latest figures are. The one I always remember, it's like 4% of Catholics, I don't use NFP or something like that. Now I don't know if they include people that just use nothing, don't use contraception, don't use NFP, or just the quiver full people, or whether, I mean, I would think those are um, a distinctly smaller group than even the NFP users. But um, I think that it's just remarkable to me that in an era where we can't even get more than 4% of Catholics to use NFP, even under the sort of a liberal standard, why are we even bothering to talk about trying to make it even more rigorous than that? And because if we'll play some of these clips, but where they start talking about it's basically a venial sin. For example, one of the things they say is it's a venial sin. Like, this is not debatable. It's a venial sin if the couple um, engages in the marital act purely for the pleasure and enjoyment of it. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and that is, certainly not something that the TOB people would agree with, and I don't think most traditionalists agree with that. Like, I think most traditionalists are the mindset, hey, as long as you're not impeding it through contraception or NFP, and have fun and enjoy it as much as you want. I mean, they've kind of taken the good parts of TOB, which is that, yes, sex is a good and wonderful and enjoyable thing,
Mhm.
and as long as you're not interrupting procreation or whatever, it's yours to enjoy. But these guys would be like, hold on, that's not even allowable. So it's a weird I mean, I guess I would say in deference to these guys, I think they probably are the most pure and consistent in terms of how they apply all the different rules. I think most of us, even our good friend Jonah 2.0, we're all cafeteria Catholics to some respect, right? And I think it's just a matter of degree.
Yeah, I agree. It's like there's certain types of cafeteria Catholic that are acceptable within the mainstream, and others that are still kind of on the fringes. But you're right. It's impossible to take everything in the Bible literally, and it's impossible to take every single like fine print of 2,000 years of church teaching. Like, I think one of the cliche examples is we're certainly not really emphasizing anything about usury these days.
Yeah.
And even though it's like it hasn't been struck from the law, so in that sense, it hasn't been, you know, removed or modified, but it's by virtue of not talking about it and not putting it into practice. It's like a quiet version of setting it aside and picking and choosing.
Yep. So I think, I mean, so I think it's interesting to talk about what these guys say, because I think in some respects, um, I think in some respects these guys uh, shine a light on some of the rules that even the traditionalists kind of just ignore. So if we're okay, if it's okay to ignore certain things, where do we draw the line at where some things have to be followed and some things can kind of be ignored? It's not like they really get expressly um, let's say overruled by the church. They just kind of like, yeah, we'll just stop talking about that, and then eventually people stop talking about it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's jump into it. I got a couple here that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah. Go
One,
for it.
and so one of the things that they talk about is they talk about, there was, I was a little surprised by this, but they talk about there was sort of the rules set forth by Augustine and Aquinas, and then there was the changes, if you will, of opinion by Saint Alphonsus Liguori.
Mm-hmm.
And if I recall correctly, under Saint Augustine, it was only appropriate to approach the marital act for procreation, which is, you know, always permissible. And number two, to render the marital debt. So if one spouse requested the marital debt, the other spouse was obligated to grant it and would not be committing sin. um, and in the idea was you could approach the marital debt for, because you wanted to make a baby, or to, what I would say, ease concupiscence, or if you're on the brink of committing a sin of some sort, you could invoke the marital debt. And apparently under Aquinas and Augustine, it was venially sinful for the person invoking the marital debt to request it other than for the purpose of procreation. And then Saint Alphonsus Liguori, I believe, said no, it's not it's not a venial sin to request the marital debt, if because that's one of the purposes of it is to keep you from falling into other sin, right?
Yeah.
So
No, that's exactly the point that I understood from that segment too.
I'm going to play that just so people can hear it, and maybe if they want to comment about it. So I'm just going to pull up a couple timestamps here. 26 this so I'm going to start at about 26:20, I think, is kind of where this part of it starts. I'll play the two together, so both, because then the other thing that they say is, because whereas they say there's sort of reasonable debate about whether it's venially sinful for the spouse requesting the marital debt, they assert, and I'm not, this I think would be surprising to even some traditionalists, that it's undisputed that it's always venially sinful for a couple to request the marital act purely for pleasure, or to not even request it, but like they both decide they want to do it. So I'm going to start at 26:20.
I don't know if I should get into this now, but we also do have an actual magisterial teaching that says that other motives are
Can you hear that okay?
Yep. Oh yeah, that's coming out clear.
Okay, good.
allowed to be considered as secondary Pius XI says this in Casti Connubii, right? That other motives such as, I don't remember the list, but health, the strengthening of the marriage bond, mutual aid, those things are able to be considered as long as they are subordinated to the primary end of marriage. Those things can't be considered in isolation from those primary ends, but they can be considered as sort of your subjective motivations. In other words, it's not sinful to be motivated by emotional bonding with my spouse. Right. So that also maybe complicates it.
I think I missed that part. Let me start back. I'm going to go. That was another point, but let me go
Mhm.
back here to 25. Let me have started. Sorry about that. I
No
think I had a
worries.
typo.
Or in my opinion. So that's sort of where that goes in the book.
So and just for the listeners'
Yeah, I had it wrong. So it starts at 25:20. So I'm going to play that section.
sake,
Okay.
that is one of those areas that's definitely not a matter of opinion. So the view that of Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, that requesting the marital debt for any reason other than procreation would be a venial sin is a matter of opinion, and as you just said, one that has sort of been dropped by the tradition. However, not just Pope Innocent XI, but any father or doctor of the church who ever commented on this topic would say that it is sinful, venially, for a married couple to have relations purely for the purpose of pleasure.
Right.
And then the
So that, I mean, I assume they're right about that. That is certainly, I would say, is inconsistent with theology of the body. I don't remember if Casti Connubii, John, our good friend John, would be able to tell us whether Casti Connubii says anything about that. But they're saying that it is venially sinful, not mortally sinful, but venially sinful for a couple to come together and enjoy the marital act purely for pleasure, even if they're doing nothing to, let's say, prohibit procreation. They're not using birth control, they're not using contraception. They just decide that today, hey, I really want to enjoy that with you, and they do that. They say that's venially sinful, and I don't think there are too many Catholics today, even most hardcore traditionalists, that abide by that. What does Jonah 2.0 think about that?
Well, do we take the opinions of homosexuals seriously on this on this live chat?
We listen to everyone.
Okay, I'm sorry. I need to put my homophobia away. That's very trad of me.
So, I mean, that is there. I mean, I think I would want to know that. Like, if that is in fact true and binding on us as Catholics, to me that is kind of a big deal. To me that is kind of a big deal because that just adds to, I don't know, the body of evidence that I have to suggest that if the traditionalists are right, marriage is basically a near occasion of sin and people should avoid it if at all possible. Like, well, okay, so Jonah says venial sin is a daily, probably hourly occurrence for most very good people. Well, okay, be
I
that
mean,
as
yeah,
it
I think,
may,
yeah, in the sense that we're all imperfect, sure.
but is it I mean, what do you think, Jonah? Is it venially sinful if you and your wife decide to engage in the marital act because you both really enjoy it and want to enjoy it together? And let's say it's you're not fertile. Maybe it's that time of the month or you're postpartum or whatever. It is that. Do you think that's really a venial sin? I mean, do people actually think that?
Well, he says
Jonah?
yes in the chat.
Okay, I understand why your wife says what she does about you. Um, so so I want to get to this comment here. So literally everyone seems to think that invoking the marital debt is at best a venial sin.
My interpretation, and Dev Pav, you let me know if I'm wrong. My interpretation of that statement is that we think it's at least venially sinful to sort of even softly coerce your spouse into rendering the marital debt. Maybe circumstances aren't particularly good. Maybe someone's not feeling well. So in that sense, I think that the marital debt is sinful, not in the sense of the sexual pleasure, but in coercing someone. Because I contend that that marital debt objectifies spouses more than other sexual behaviors.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I agree with you. I mean, I am, what do I say, far more bothered by the idea of someone coercing their spouse to have sex with them than I am about a couple deciding to have sex because, well, it just feels good and they want to do that together. Like, to me, but that's not what they're coming from. Like, the coercive element is not the problem here. That was not Aquinas's problem. It was not Augustine's problem. They're fine with that. What they're focused on is what's your motivation? And unless you're trying to make a baby, you should just go without sex. Like if you're that is it. Now, one thing that's really funny, Eamonn was talking about how he said, I can't believe this hasn't been discussed anywhere, but he said it hasn't actually been discussed whether on your wedding day, consummating the marriage is a sufficiently valid basis to engage in the marital act if you're not, in a position where you're trying to make a baby. Like, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Honestly, I hate to, like, insult your show or with more heresy, Onan, but like I think like if the sex for pleasure thing is venial and that was just like, it had 2000 years of the church's stamp of approval, I kind of feel like that would just move me away from the notion of infallibility. I know, stone me to death, burn me at the stake. Yeah. And I'm speaking here. I'm not coerced by Onan to say this, so his show is clean. This is entirely on Midnight Philosopher. But yeah, this blood is on my hands, but maybe it's heretical to say, but I think that would just invalidate centuries of church authority because it's such a crazy pathology. It pathologizes just human nature and biology. It's kind of insane.
Well, it does one of two things in my mind, and I'll join you on the heresy wagon here for a little bit. I mean, it in my mind, if enjoying the marital act, even if it's just for pleasure, because you both enjoy it and you enjoy enjoying it together and you enjoy giving that pleasure to each other, if that's venially sinful, even if you don't use birth control, have never studied NFP, this is what we want to do today. If that's a venial sin, it's hard for me to not start down the road of thinking that this all looks like a big trap set for us by God, right?
Absolutely.
And I knew this was going to come up. We're fallen, our impulses are corrupted. That gets blamed for a lot of stuff, and I think one can certainly argue that true sexual degeneracy, you're out cheating on your spouse, those kinds of things.
Yeah,
Maybe,
I think
probably.
I think having smoking hot, passionate sex with your wife that you'll be with until you die is very different from like participating in hookup culture, just going to the bars, picking up a
Yes.
random lady every other week,
Yes.
and there's something very disposable and transactional.
Right.
Now, the only thing I will say is even in those moments, like I absolutely against hookup culture. The one thing I would say is that even though that's even in peak hedonism, and even when people are very superficial, I think the one idea that I completely disagree with, and I think is a mischaracterization, I think only psychopaths would look for pleasure for its own sake. I think people are looking for connection, and they might be immature, they might have poor discipline and make really shitty choices, but at the heart of like people's sexual escapades is still looking for human connection. It's not just they end up falling into a trap of empty pleasure, but at the heart of it, I don't think that's what they're looking for. And more so in marriage, I really I'm against the idea of having sex for pleasure alone, because I don't think that I feel like pleasure is the byproduct of looking to be intimate with the person that you're spending your life with. It's not like, oh, I'm looking for pleasure and I have this like hot lady that I married, so I'm gonna have her help me feel pleasure. It's about the experience of the two people being together, you know? It's like an expression of that intimacy. So anyway, that was my little diatribe where I really dislike the skepticism about pleasure.
Right. And I mean, and again, and, they talk about pure pleasure, and I don't know what they mean by that. I mean, because I mean, again, if they have no experience with this, they have no experience with this. But I sort of put pleasure in, let's say, three main categories, three different types of pleasure that come from it. I would say, one, let's say, bucket of pleasure is sort of the, I don't know, the foreplay, the intimacy prior to climax, and then climax. You have that. So one category is everything prior to climax. The second is the active climax itself, which I don't is pretty short lived. You're talking seconds for most of us, not minutes. So you have that, and then you have, I would say, and this is really, I think, the more important thing is you have sort of the third bucket of pleasure, which is it just leaves you feeling better afterwards. And Jonah and I always talk about it as the bliss period, but there is a definite chemical biological response from a pleasure standpoint. For now, I'm not really talking about the bonding and the closeness that you enjoy, but
Mm-hmm.
just this idea of pleasure. I mean, I don't think, for me at least, when I have the desire, it is not really for that second bucket, because quite
Mm-hmm.
frankly, it's very short lived. Like, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it because I want the, you know, 5 seconds or 10 seconds or whatever it is of the most extreme pleasure you can experience. And it's really not even so much about the pleasure that goes up to it, because even that, I mean, for us married people that have a bunch of kids, we're not spending hours at this. Like, we're minutes, right? And so for me, it is maybe the total package, but it really is the I don't know, the benefit that comes for hours and days afterwards. And what do they mean by that? And maybe they have no concept of that.
Mm-hmm.
If they've never been intimate with someone, they may not know this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to bring attention to something our buddy DevPav said, which I think is an interesting point. He says people don't consume porn for the human connection, and I think I actually disagree there. I'm not saying, not all porn use is about human connection, but there's so many studies on this that the correlation between sexual frustration in the marriage or loneliness, and I think something that Jonah 1.0 or Jonah Prime once mentioned about people falling into porn because they want a virtual experience of that connection from witnessing a woman enjoy intimacy. I think he said
Mhm.
something along those lines. And I think that, yeah, I'm not here to be a porn apologist. I'm not here saying it's good, it's a net good for society that porn is widely available, but I think it's a symptom of looking for human connection. I think it really is only psychopaths who treat people as commodities to be sold. And yes, there are people that are pimps, there are human traffickers that really just, people and pleasure is a commodity to them. But I think for most average people that fall into porn, it's this weakness and this loneliness and isolation and alienation, and they're looking for some kind of human connection, and of course they're settling for counterfeit. They're settling for something that eventually will leave them spiritually empty, and it can be harmful to an existing relationship that you're in, but you might be frustrated. So I'm not here to say that porn is good, but I do think that people are looking for a human connection and they just settle for the counterfeit. I really don't think people generally look for sex purely for sex.
I might be somewhere in between you guys. I mean, I think that here's what I think. Again, I don't think everyone that uses that approaches it from the same situation, because for the same motivations, because I think it does depend a lot on your circumstances. But you know, I think that I mean, this is primarily a man problem. It's not only a man problem, but from the standpoint of men, I think guys that are in a relationship where they feel unloved, or or worse, feel kind of despised, are vulnerable, or porn feels desirable to them because they can imagine themselves enjoying that pleasurable and intimate experience with someone who on film is not only happy to be there, but is impressed, like wants to serve them, and so I think for guys or anyone who's in a relationship where they don't feel that connection with their partner or their spouse,
Mhm.
I think porn can fill that for those people. I think on a more practical level, I think you probably have a large segment of people who are, I don't know, just looking to masturbate, and it lubricates the imagination, I guess,
I
to
think that
do that
yeah.
with
Mhm.
sight and sounds assisting you than relying on your imagination, and so those people fall into that category. And like you, I'm not condoning it. I'm not saying it's wrong, and it is a dangerous drug. Like I to me, the porn should be avoided primarily because it is a really dangerous thing. You can get addicted to it, and I think it can and does risk altering or harming your relationship with your spouse, the person that you are to be with. But that doesn't mean, I don't think it means that every time anyone uses it, it has, it's going to lead to that. I think for a lot of people, it's probably a little, I don't know, more of just a practical transactional experience for them. But I don't know. That's just my. This is where I'm outside of my element, and I'm just kind of speculating
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, no, I think those are fair points. Yeah, maybe you wanna bring it back. Is there another aspect of the Amon episode that you wanna bring up?
Yeah. So here, this is. I think I may have even played this a little bit. Oh, one thing I wanted to ask, because when he was talking about, it's not sinful to. I think they said it's permissible to desire sex for the bonding experience. I think as long as it's. I think I think they say it still has to be secondary to a primary proper end, such as like procreation. So this is where I don't understand the primary and secondary aspects of it. Can Because they recognize that there are valid secondary reasons to engage in the marital act, curbing concupiscence, bonding, comfort. As long as it's not purely about pleasure, it can be about those other things. But I don't think it can be just about those things. I think it has to be following essentially the desire for procreation. Like if you're in a situation where you're, let's say you're past menopause, I don't know that these guys really have a way to that a couple could engage in that without at least one of them committing some sort of sin. Uh,
Yeah, I
that's
think
my
that
impression.
100%. I think that part of the conversation, about, like, the kind of ranking the motivations for sex and trying to identify something that's, what's venially sinful. I think that was the point where, one, it became clearly very evident that we're dealing with two people that are inexperienced in marriage and are
Yeah,
single. I
yeah.
think it also kind of, I brought this up in the Discord, that like that this it's like Thomism taken to an extreme is a total mental illness. Kind of, it, to allude to Chesterton. Chesterton said that GK Chesterton said that we tend to conceive of madness as the absence of reason,
Yeah.
but he said that no, it's when you have reason and nothing else. And that's the thing with this. It's like it's no emotion, no experience, no data, just logic, and from all of these philosophical and theological abstractions, which work on paper, they work in an ivory tower, but that's just not how we experience life. And to tell us not to trust our experiences and not to trust, how we've learned to navigate and still learn to navigate marriage, it's a total form of gaslighting, and it is a mental illness to sort of to refuse to accept that reality is not as linear as these guys really want.
Mhm, mhm.
And so much about the conversations about NFP for Catholics, and then for the general public that aren't religious, birth control, it's not, it doesn't emerge from a hatred of life, but it's about, we need agency in navigating circumstances, because life is messy, whether it's health stuff or economic stuff, or maybe you already have 5 kids and you just don't have space for more. It's not like your desire for your spouse just goes away. And it's
Mhm.
insane to think that desiring your spouse is pathological and venially sinful. I think that's bonkers.
Well, there's a real zinger, I think, coming up that when I heard it, I just about laughed out loud, that kind of relates to that. I want to play one section quick before we get to it, though, and it deals with, let's see. Oh, is sex a need? It kind of gets to that question. So I want to, they talk about that there are, I think they said, 3 good or permissible reasons to use the marital act. So I want to play that section, and then I want to talk about another one. Okay, here we go.
And oppose me on this. But the argument ultimately is that if one is not seeking one of those 3 goods, and with the possible exception of the consummation of marriage, and kind of leaving that aside,
Sure.
procreation, to pay the debts, or to ease concupiscence that is.
So those are the 3, I guess, goods of marriage, appropriate uses of the marital act is, what did he say? Procreation, oh shoot, pay the debt,
Mm-hmm.
and
Relief
eating.
of concupiscence.
Yeah,
Was it
which
relief? Yeah, relief of
which I don't
concupiscence.
necessarily understand the difference between.
Yeah, marital debt and yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that
I don't
seems to be what
really.
it's there for, but
Yeah. The only possible distinction I could think of is someone asks for the marital debt not to relieve concupiscence, but for fulfilling an emotional need, not really a physical urge. That's the only thing I could possibly think of. I don't have the timestamp for that, but related to that, just the segment you played, I think was kind of this weird almost loop that you get yourself into. He had said that you use the marital debt to relieve concupiscence, and the understanding of concupiscence is you want too much intimacy. So it's like you use intimacy so that you don't want too much intimacy, and it's just this, man,
yeah,
you can really think yourself into knots with this stuff.
yeah, these guys, I don't know, it gets pretty crazy pretty fast. But I want to continue on because they, I'll just let them speak for themselves.
Is not otherwise reasonably relieved.
Oh yeah, so concupiscence, you can use it if there's no other reasonable way to relieve it. So I guess if can't get enough ice packs or something like that. But the
Yeah.
idea being is,
Mhm.
you should not use the marital act to relieve concupiscence if there are other ways to deal with the urge.
Yeah, and I think that's when he said, go for a walk or
Yeah,
hit the gym or something, which
exactly.
I can see that from the certain point, if you're only dealing with a purely physical urge,
Yeah.
I can kind of see the logic there. But I think the difficult thing with sex is I don't think it's ever just physical. I mean, maybe for some it is. I know that you, in your own experience, it primarily manifests as physical, but I think it's also, I would imagine that some part of that is also inextricably connected to your just the desire to reinforce your bond with your wife. And yeah, I think our bodies are different, so it might manifest uh you know with more emotional, more physical for different men, but rarely is it purely one thing, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that's true. And they, these are the rules that Augustine and, the illustrious Aquinas gave us, and so they just don't really think that they're at liberty to expand on that. I mean, that's kind of what, like I said, I think these guys are, what to say, accurately trying to take to the logical, conclusions, Augustine and Aquinas. The problem here is, yeah, that's a problem, that this is all that Augustine and Aquinas allowed. But now I want to talk about what this is where I think this is very fascinating. This is the reason why that they give for why it is wrong to, at least for one of the parties, to use the marital act, except for procreation. They
Mhm.
tolerate it. That's fine for procreation, but they merely tolerate it for everything else. And this is why they claim the church has historically been, reluctant to let people have sex except to procreate. So this is the reason they give, and I'd be curious what people think about this. So let's see here.
It's really that third point that needs to be considered honestly. Do I really need this? And in the background, which probably some viewers are, really confused, why is this an issue at all? The fundamental anthropological principle, which animates this part of ascetical theology, is that the use of reason is good. And it's in fact so good that we are bound to keep it unless there is something that suffices for removing it, right? This is why drunkenness is a sin. It's why drugs are sinful. You remove the use of your reason. In the marriage act, the pleasures are so intense that your reason is either strongly inhibited or entirely removed from its act. That's the thing that's going on underneath of this, and it's got to be made clear that that's the issue for St. Thomas, and he talks about this in the Summa or in the Supplementum. That's the thing that's going on underneath of this conversation. Why are you removing the use of your reason? That's what's at issue.
Just think about that. Isn't that the craziest thing you've ever heard?
It's wild because even sticking with what they said, if it removes our reason, that's just the nature of that's how our bodies are designed. As Pilate said, we only have enough blood for one.
That's right.
It's
That's
literally
right.
it's inherent in our design, and no one goes into no one goes into sex with their wife. I know that people use sex and they use drugs and alcohol to self-medicate for other problems that they should address, but in the context of a loving marriage, we're not saying I want to suspend my reason. It's wild.
Maybe this is why these guys were all suspicious of the women enjoying and having orgasms, because they wanted at least one of the persons there with their reason intact, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. That is crazy that supposedly the reason for that is they're somehow it's transgressing, violating nature, because you allow your mind, your reason to, I guess, shut off and I think if we're being fair here, I think it's the however many seconds your orgasm takes. I don't think your reason really shuts off that entire time. And again, I don't know that these guys have any experience with this. This is where I think it matters. It's not like if you are, let's say you're on the generous side. Let's say you and your spouse spend an hour at passionate lovemaking.
Mm-hmm.
The most of that, yeah, I mean, the pleasures are, I don't know, I guess intense is sort of a relative word, but it's not really super intense until the final moment for each of them, right? Maybe for women can experience multiple orgasms. For men, I think, unless you're especially very unique, it's a one-time thing,
Yeah.
and it's very short-lived, right? And so do they think that, if you're making love for an hour, you're suspending your reason for an hour?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's it. I mean, you almost have to use your reason if you are a good lover to do the things that your spouse wants and needs to get them ready for that.
100%. And also, if you need to pull the Onan special and pull out, you need reason for that.
Yeah, exactly. And this is right. Like, if someone barged in on you, you would have the good sense to reach into the drawer and pull out, the old 1911 or whatever you're packing,
absolutely.
right? So
Oh, man.
this is just, I mean, I don't know that I ever heard this before, but when I saw that, I was like, this is why people that don't have experience with this need to just take a step back and ask people, because I don't think anyone that has been sexually active would, I mean, that just seems like an absurd reason. Doesn't mean that the rule can't be right. Like, but that reason, I think, is just so logically crazy that no one should take it seriously, right? This is not an attack on the rule. This particular explanation, I
Yeah.
think, deserves
Mhm.
scrutiny and ridicule.
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
my
I'm
opinion.
absolutely with you. If I'm gonna, sort of be on their side for a second and just steel man their point, the kindest interpretation I could give this is just, especially, it's hard to really see this in the context of marriage, but let's just say you're like a Don Juan and you're doing hookup culture and all that stuff. I could see the point where, your addiction to all of these
Yeah.
escapades,
Yeah.
and it's sort of, you neglect your responsibilities, you neglect that journey that you should be on to cultivate a life of virtue. So in that sense, it dulls your senses and it dulls your resolve to pursue the good. I can totally understand it from that point. But in terms of this, like the sex act and the pursuit of orgasm, being sinful because it suspends reason in the context of marriage, that's wild. And sorry for this, really, I hope this isn't too much of a negative image, but I just couldn't help but imagine, what are they going to do if they're like in the heat of climax with their wife? Oh my God, honey, I'm about to suspend my reason.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and again, unless you're gonna, I mean, do these guys think orgasm is from concupiscence? I mean,
Yeah.
I think Augustine was more or less had this idea that we were all just, I don't know, we were all Spock. We just kind of like procreated by osmosis or something like that, and
Yeah.
didn't experience pleasure. But I don't know.
Mhm.
I think this stuff's all. I think these basic elements of it, these basic biological elements of the act and the lead up and the aftermath, are there by design, right? That doesn't mean
Yeah.
you don't. That doesn't mean you're not required to use reason to moderate those, if you will. But I think I mean, they're essentially saying a fundamental component of the marital. I mean, again, getting back to the whole idea that it has to finish the right way. That means the man has to ejaculate and have orgasm.
Mhm.
That is part of the design. How and why would God create this design if it is inevitably going to lead people to sin? I mean, I think that's a fair question that needs to be answered.
I agree. I think that's why sex and marriage and all of these things will always continue to be a hot topic, because it's the point of greatest tension, when you're considering theology and your relationship with the divine and your relationship with yourself and your own body, that this is the place with the most like pitfalls, and it seems to be baked into the design, and it's this and that, mortal sin, receiving communion, sacrilegiously, all of that, this whole network of stuff that just adds so much stress and so much self-imposed stress. It really does become masochistic at a point.
Yeah, it does feel that way. Anything else about that?
I think that was good on that particular point.
So I want to flip ahead. I'm going to go to around minute 38. Eamonn makes this claim that about what married couples think that to me is, I don't think any married couple really thinks that way, and it reflects a lack of experience. But maybe Jonah, I'm sure Jonah 2.0 would disagree with me, but I want to play a section here. So this is
Mhm.
starting at like 37, 39. I might be playing a little bit early, but it's close.
End of the marriage act, which is procreation. At that point, there's certain limits that are placed, greater limits that are placed on your allowable ability to just indulge freely in marital relations. So that's the basic point.
That's the basic point, and that's sort of that you get kind of the opposite, from a lot of popular presentations. Like, as long as you have a good reason to avoid children, you can do whatever you want.
This is where he's being critical of sort of the way they characterize the current TOB culture, which is as long as you have a legitimate reason to avoid children, you're perfectly free to enjoy sex as much as you want during the infertile times, and they're
Mhm.
pushing back against that.
Yeah.
It's all fine, and something doesn't sit right with I think a lot of faithful couples are like, really, like, is that like, really,
That
So
was
he's
wild. That's a weird. That's a lot of projection, buddy.
I just yeah
That's insane.
yeah he's saying again, he's not married. he seems to believe that a bunch of married couples are faithful married couples. So maybe that's how they always do it. Well, if you don't think this way, you're just not a faithful married person, right? But he says that faithful married couples are, um, you know, like you said, really, when you say that, if you have a valid reason to use NFP, let's say you've got the just cause or whatever, he thinks that faithful married couples would be skeptical of the idea that they're free to enjoy the marital act during the infertile times during the month. And I don't know. I have,
That's
I have
yeah.
yet to find anyone that really would fit
Yeah.
into that mold.
If I had to steel man that point again, I could understand couples being skeptical that that's what the church says, but not
Yeah.
that in and of itself it's wrong. Yeah, I could understand couples that like would be skeptical, like why is the church being so enthusiastic about sex all of a sudden that we're allowed to enjoy it? But yeah, in terms of that, like I don't think that's just such a weirdly twisted point.
Yeah.
And again, I think that I'll probably keep saying this until my deathbed. It's very rare for people. I mean, and there are people out there that they're unfortunately whatever because of whatever disorder or trauma they've had that they don't like the idea of family life. But really, most normal people, they still want family. They still want kids. Yeah, it might not be a whole quiverful like 6, 7, 8 kids, but most people still want at least 2 or 3 kids, and they want to dote on them. They want to pass on something of a legacy. They want to help their kids like discover some kind of beauty in life. And that's the thing with this. I think this system really coerces you into parenthood that you're not ready for, rather than giving you space to sort of determine and discern when you're ready for this. It's really difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible, and I'm not trying to throw shade at large families and stuff, but
Mhm.
I think people just want tools. They want a little more control because life is messy, and there really just are a bajillion different challenges. We don't need to add anymore. Life is just tough.
Yeah, and one of the things that they talk about, I don't have the timestamps here, so I must not have written it down. But one of the things that they talked about and I think agreed upon was I don't know if they said it was I want to say, I don't think they thought couples had to do this or would be engaging in venial sin, but they more or less implied that once you get, let's say, past childbearing years, the right thing to do is to stop engaging in the marital act. And they, of course, point to saints in the past or couples in the past who were recognized by saints and doctors who decided to live like brother and sister after their childbearing years were done so that they could focus on prayer and contemplation and kind of getting back to this other point about reason, you know be exercising their reason without suspending it for a period of time during the conjugal act. To me, again, this is where I think my own experience would differ from that is I in my own experience, I am thinking the clearest, and I think having the best ability to orient my mind and my heart towards God and things of prayer when the sort of the sexual needs of life were being satisfied or recently been satisfied. Like um I don't believe for a minute that someone who is uh, abstaining for an extended period of time, living in the same house as someone is. I mean, I just can't imagine you ever get past the stress and the biological impacts of that. That to me, that seems much more likely to interfere with a desire to be, like channeling your mind and strengthening your mind and your heart and spirit than it would be when this part of your life is neutralized, if you will, because your needs are being met. I don't know. Again, that's my feeling. It seems to me again that they're kind of coming at this from a place of ignorance because they don't know anything different. They only know the state of celibacy, if you will.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think it's so much easier to be frigid and logical with these things. I mean, yeah, in another lifetime, like half my life ago, when I was just, I always make the joke that I'm a recovering homeschooler, but man, like it was so easy for me to get on my soapbox and just preach about these things. And I hadn't been in a relationship. I didn't even fully understand sex, and I kind of feel like even though I physically hit puberty early, or sorry, not early, I physically hit puberty kind of when at the expected time. I like mentally and emotionally, it just that stuff didn't hit me until like my mid 20s. I think my development in that area was just so delayed, and I stayed pretty innocent and just sheltered for a long time. And maybe that's good in the sense that I really avoided most big mistakes that some younger people tend to make. And I'm not saying that to pat my own shoulder back and that I was particularly virtuous, but back when I was like super sheltered and everything was just a simple formula, man, I could definitely get in my soapbox and probably be annoying than Father Ripperger.
Oh, I know that's a high bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of two minds about this a little bit, because I mean, I remember, I mean, I was almost 24. I think I was almost 24 when we got married. And sort of like you, I feel like I was kind of blissfully ignorant of the real struggles of the flesh until, I wouldn't say till I got married. I mean, I think once we became, very committed, knew we were getting married, and I don't know, you spend more time together, and maybe you, I don't know, kiss a little more passionately, all that, the body
Mhm.
starts to respond to that. But really, up until I had something of a pretty intense physical relationship, uh, it wasn't the flesh was, I don't know, not noticeable, but it was, I would say, a far less of an issue than once you're in that relationship with someone, you've experienced that, you're sharing a house, you see them get out of the shower, whatever. It's all just a very different thing, going, you know, that I can't explain, other than I think to live out this kind of this pure type life that they're talking about, I think is far less practical once you're married, once you're sharing a house, once you've become one flesh with someone bef- than before. Now, again, now that in some ways, I think leads back to some degree. I think it provides uh credibility to this idea that why couples might decide to give up the marital act together, because I mean, I think, again, this is where a lot of this is I guess self-imposed. I look back at my life, and we had seasons, although brief, where because of extended infertility, we were able to, and we were at a point where we were prioritizing physical intimacy. We had a period of time where I felt very fulfilled. My needs were, it wasn't every day, but it was regular, right? And the all of this stuff that I talk about that bothers me, it was almost entirely neutralized. Like, I felt my mind was clear, my motivation was strong. um it was during that period where we had regular intimacy and weren't like not being intimate for more than a few days at a time. I think that is a very, very optimal climate for couples to be in. Now, the reality is that isn't sustainable for most of us, and it certainly isn't sustainable if you find yourself where you're fertile and you need to prevent children, and let's say you resort to NFP or somewhat more extended abstinence. That's not the case. Like, that is that conflict, that stress, all that stuff gets injected back into the marriage. And yeah, that is, I mean, again, going back to what I said at the very beginning here, if I'm in the 2 week abstinence period, my whole attitude on life is different than in the 10 days, whatever, that we get when we can be intimate with each other.
Mhm.
And so I don't know, that's a long rambling thing, but I think, to me, it cuts both ways with what they're saying. And I personally think, I feel very strongly, and of course, Jonah 1.0 is kind of living embodiment of it. If you're in a situation where you are or make a commitment to being regularly physically intimate, it does so much powerfully good for the marriage and the relationship, and makes you just almost feel invincible, and whatever, that I think I don't think they really have an explanation for that.
Yeah, no, it's been like Jonah 1.0's joy is like super infectious, and
Mhm.
you can just totally pick up on the vibes like
Mhm.
through your last couple of episodes, and it's so hard to imagine that whether or not he's ticking every single box that the church wants him to. It's very difficult to imagine that's the condition of life and marriage of a man steeped in mortal sin.
Yep.
I imagine like he seems to be a better husband, a better father. He's let go of some anxiety. He's feeling joy and vibrance. And isn't that supposed to be the point of being a Christian? We're supposed to radiate joy and love.
Mhm.
I don't think being a sexually frustrated, grumpy dad with a webcam, Taylor Marshall, is really gonna like win people over.
I wanna bring up a comment. You're kind of in a conversation here, but I wanna
Mhm.
so you know here's a problem that I have identified in a lot of it's something that we've talked about. I don't know if it's been more in the Discord or if it's been in any of our discussions, but
Mhm.
and I forget, and I don't remember DevPav's background, but I believe it's similar to some of the you were talking about. Is it Mike Pantiel the other day, and
Mhm.
those guys? There are a lot of people that, especially converts, but that lived lives of, use whatever adjective you want, but we're really kind of slaves to their sexual desires. Maybe they were porn addicts, masturbation addicts. I think Pantiel made the comment that as a teenager he was quote unquote self abusing so much that he had to get like Viagra or something to get an erection. And I see a very common situation, and I don't, and I just so we're clear, I don't think that's a good thing for anyone, right? Like I think, even setting aside the moral component of it, that is not a good situation to be in. I would not want my kids to be involved with that, whether it was immoral or not. That's not a healthy thing for anyone, kids or adults, to be dealing with. And yes, like the sexual urge is an addictive drug, right? And and it can be very easy. And this is, I think, if you want to say there's an argument, that the strongest argument I think one could make is really not theological, but the strongest argument for the kind of the real traditional, just uh, don't do any of that idea is most of us probably aren't mature or disciplined enough, especially as teenagers, to restrain ourselves to moderation. Like if we're allowed to do it all, we're going to overindulge and very easily become addicted to it. I think that is I think there's merit to that, right? But I think that's a separate issue from whether it is intrinsically a bad idea, or maybe, to put it another way, I I don't believe that someone a single act of pornography is going to turn someone into um a sexual monster. No, nor do I think that a single act of contraception is going to cause irreparable harm, or really maybe any harm at all, to a marriage. Like, so these predictions that people make, whether it's about contraception or porn or whatever, are often coming from people who at one point in their life were like, I would say, completely powerless. Like they were just had no discipline at all in their life and seemed to swing to the other side and want this very uh, just very black and white, very restrictive set of rules, because I don't think they trust themselves with any amount of freedom. That's my observation.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there for sure.
So a couple other things, and we may not need to. Let's see. Uh, they, I was a little surprised. John, our good friend John. Speaking of John, John is a complicated individual because he, of course, hates NFP, and he always argues against NFP on the ground that it violates "be fruitful and multiply." But he also doesn't believe there's a duty to have kids at all. Like I'm not sure how he reconciles those. But one of the things that has always troubled me, and this is where Eamonn is trying to, um, like he doesn't challenge Humani Vitae. He tries to incorporate it in, and one of the things that I've always a long struggle with Humani Vitae is this notion that you have to have just cause, um, and because what are you needing an exemption to do exactly? Is it is it the duty to have sex? Is it the duty to procreate? Is it something else? Like, I don't understand how abstaining from something can be wrong unless there's a moral obligation to do it in the first place. And some have debated on what Paul the Sixth, was it Paul the Sixth that did Humani Vitae?
Yeah, it
Uh,
was politics.
the question is what does the just cause and the ability to use NFP exactly allow couples to do that they weren't otherwise permitted to do? And it seems to be this moral duty to procreate, and of course that was coming out in the wake of World War I, World War II, Korean War, where a lot of people had died, right? And there was
Mhm.
this sort of nationalism going on where there was this sense that you almost had a patriotic duty to be like replenishing the population. And I think this is more or less what Eamonn says here, is there actually is a duty to procreate, which I don't think John and some
Yeah, no,
other
he doesn't.
traditionalists would agree to.
Yeah, there was
Uh,
that point he said that the mo that there was kind of he thought it was terrible that couples were starting off with NFP and that you shouldn't get
y-
married until you're
yeah,
immediately ready for kids, and I can kind of see the logic about that,
yeah,
but I think maybe it's probably a generational thing too, because like it or not, the understanding of marriage throughout culture has changed. I mean, of course, it's pretty much always heterosexual, one man, one woman, with a few cases of polygamy in this or that religion or culture. But it has been about man and woman coming together, maybe binding two families of political power together, or building a legacy together. That's true, but I do think that our attitudes have changed, because there's also just you're finding your special person that you want to be with the rest of your life, and maybe you have kids and maybe you don't for natural reasons. That's not going to make you love them less, and I think that's kind of why I imagine too that the NFP culture is a recognition of that some people, they don't want to wait around. They've found their person, they want to start together, but they're just not ready to have kids. But are they just going to live in pent up frustration and not get married and risk fornicating technically, because they have a moment of weakness of being with each other, but they're not technically married because they shouldn't get married because they're not ready for kids? And then it brings up the whole thing of like, so does that mean a life of virtue is only for people that are rich or healthy?
yeah. I mean, and I say this as someone who, we had plans to use NFP for the first couple years of our marriage, because we got married after my wife graduated college and before I was going on to graduate school. And we're like, well, let's get through graduate school. Well, we were pregnant within the first month and a half, so these guys should love
Hmm.
the path that we took. But one thing is that I've observed, and this, what you just said, kind of goes to that, is it feels, and this is this is where I think it matches up with what John talks about. He hates this idea that there's love is a required part of it. Marriage is a contract, and it's for the rights to the body to acts that result in procreation. I mean, it's essentially, if you want to do it, if you want to, if we're being truthful,
Mm-hmm.
it's a sort of a church sanctioned breeding contract, right? And
Mm-hmm.
even Eamonn in this thing talks about the how, like, one of the purposes of procreation is to make souls for God, which,
Yeah.
okay, that's fine, but the the making the baby is the easy part, right? What I think they raising the kids, I think, is the hard part that gets overlooked.
Yeah.
And raising
Absolutely.
the kids well, and in whatever, I think that is, to me, most of us, no matter how much, and especially if you pair that with the what I think is the more traditional ideas, don't have long engagements, right? Like, you find your person and you kind of rush to the altar, but because God forbid you're gonna
Yeah.
fall into sin. And so there is this rush to get married and then start making babies, which, that again, that's the easy part. But most of us, marry, dating doesn't prepare you for the true intimate nature of a marriage, of a one flesh union, getting to know each other, learning yourself, learning who this person is now that you're married, learning who you are, strengths, weaknesses, the honeymoon wears off and reality sets in. And I strongly think that a lot of us, and this is, I would say this is true in our marriage, you get thrown into the baby making, baby raising phase before you've really even figured out who you are as a couple, where your weaknesses are, what your dreams are. And that is where I think the value can be. And I would encourage people to get married, and don't be afraid to give yourself a period of time. Maybe it's a year, maybe it's two, maybe it's shorter or longer, but, like, experience being married, experience, learn more about your spouse, do those things that will build you up and make you better able to be parents for the rest of your life to these kids that you're going to make.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm fully on board with what you just said. I think, you know, I think a huge part of Christianity, which is a beautiful part of Christianity and an important one, is that love and self-sacrifice are they're connected. Greater love
Yes.
hath no man than if you lay down your life, metaphorically and literally lay down your life. But at the same time, there's also the injunction that we must love one another and love our neighbor as ourselves. And that extends to our kids. If we have nothing left, like, I know you
Hmm.
often use the metaphor, if your cup is empty and you have
Hmm.
nothing left to give,
Yeah.
you know there needs to be a balance where you take care of yourself, you take care of the relationship.
Right.
And a few months ago, when fake and gay Tim Gordon had Father Rip on his show, and then they were talking about prioritizing couples, the couples prioritizing each other, spouses
Hmm.
prioritizing each other.
Hmm.
That totally made sense, but it's also at conflict with the technical demands of just you know sexual frustration or perpetual reproduction. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way that a couple can prioritize each other
Right.
under those circumstances,
Right.
unless you're filthy stinking rich and you just have a bunch of maids and helpers.
Yep. Yep. Or you spend 20 years just thrashing around without, good, I guess, a good balance in your life, like we did. I mean, that's just,
Hmm.
so that I think is where these guys really, again, I think they're well intentioned, but I think they show their ignorance a little
Hmm.
bit. So, um, want to talk a little bit about the marital debt before we
Yeah,
wrap up here?
sounds good. Saving the best for last.
Yeah, so, I always get a kick out of these guys that advocate the marital debt. So let me see
Mhm.
if I can find it here. I'm gonna scroll ahead a little bit. Let's see. Let's see. Uh-huh, okay. We'll start here. This might be midstream, but it'll get to.
What about this and what about that? And does this count? And I sort of found all these loopholes. I'm trying to propose a fair way of reading that condemnation. For marital debt, this is something that a lot of people just are uncomfortable with as a basic idea. I think they really just kind of need to get over that. Like,
just get over it, guys. Again, he has no.
Yeah,
you know, maybe you didn't really understand what marriage meant. You know, and like, hey, it's right there in First Corinthians. It's right there in the entire tradition. It's right there in the very logic of what marriage is.
I don't know that it logically follows that. I mean, I guess if you see marriage as a breeding contract, maybe.
Yeah, it's all about breeding and also like relieving your concupiscence. But it's just this negative view of desire and pleasure is so baked into the system that they really can't see it any other way. But it is twisted that, like, you know, the idea of using the marriage debt to relieve concupiscence, which is your desire for sex, and you can demand sex in order to relieve your desire for sex, and it's kind of wild. It's insane. It's kind of it's kind of asylum stuff, man.
But you may not be able to do it without committing a venial sin, though.
Yeah, so that's true. Because if you're only don't get too carried away. Don't enjoy it too much, and
we'll allow you to use it to avoid a mortal sin, but we're still going to nail you with something. So we're going to make sure you walk away with a venial sin. But and then he goes on here. I'm going to play the rest of this, and he talks about exceptions or non-exceptions to the marital debt. So let's continue.
So just kind of swallow that pill. You know, this is a real thing, but it also has a reasonable dynamic to it. You know, just to use
what's the spirit? What's the spirit in which we should discuss this?
Yeah, I mean, a spirit of you know, being adults. You know, like for a husband to use the imperative mood in, you know, a suggestion about having relations does not necessarily mean a strict appeal to his rights as a husband. You know, and you get this kind of ham-fisted treatment by some speakers. I won't name names, but one in particular really just says no.
Who do you?
I'm kind of thinking he's talking about our good buddy annulment proof. I think.
I think they were talking about Timothy Gordon.
Oh, okay. I could see that. Yeah, I could see that.
Let's play it again. We'll let people judge for themselves. Let me just go back. Let me just listen carefully, and then you guys drop in the comments who you think he was referring to. I should have kept my opinion to myself, but
you know, and you get this kind of ham-fisted treatment by some speakers. I won't name names, but one in particular really just says no. Every request must be fulfilled immediately. That's it. And if you don't agree with that, you know, you don't understand. You know, this is.
So he's trying to take a softer approach to that. So I don't know. I mean, I can't think of someone who'd be more known that has that opinion than,
okay, Deb Pav agrees with you.
I mean,
Timothy Gordon. There should be a prize. Maybe you should put a Twitter poll, and then there's a prize for whoever gets it right. We just need to.
Yeah.
Well, those of us who aren't blocked by Eamonn can DM him.
That's a small crowd, but we'll let you guys decide. But that Tim Gordon was my guess, so we'll continue on here.
Like, it's just not a human way of understanding communication. And also, you know, you would presume that your spouse actually cares about your own needs as well. It's like, no, honey, I had a headache. It's like, oh, okay, I didn't know. Like, that's fine. You know, okay, all right. Well, there you go. That's fine. But to just kind of, you know, cartoonize this issue is not a good thing.
And I agree with that. I mean, I think he's right. I think he is right in calling out whoever it is that he's talking about, but the Timothy Gordon-ish people that say, oh no, you know, anytime the man says it, it's got to be honored, and you know, and it's a, you know, they say it's a mortal sin to the wife to say no, you know, unless, and we'll go on, they try to talk about what are the reasons a wife can say no and what are the reasons that she can't.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I mean, even though I still don't like the idea of marital debt, I'm glad that his approach is a lot softer than I thought it would be, and so I'm glad that Eamonn is he seems more amicable than I wrongly assumed. But yeah, oh man, like Timothy Gordon, dude, like that guy. That's also why I really can't take Mike Pantiel. I call him Mikey Pantyhose. like apparently Tim Gordon is like the godfather to one of his daughters, and then he loves Tim Gordon. Mikey Pantyhose, you need better friends, dude. Like, don't do this to yourself. Being friends with Tim Gordon, that's self abuse.
Self abuse, yeah. I agree. All right, let's continue on.
There is the baseline fundamental obligation, but normally in the dynamics of human communication, we're talking about something not reaching that point. And then on the other side, there's when can you refuse it? And that's its own whole extended casuistic analysis. Like, obviously, if it's going to be deadly, that's one thing. But
so apparently you can say no to the marital debt if it's going to kill you. Now,
are any men that big that they can kill their wives from one?
I'm not. So
Thomas gives the example of leprosy, right? That's
Okay, so what do you think? For those that haven't read it, if your husband has leprosy and he invokes the marital debt, is that a valid reason to say no to the marital debt? What do you think?
That's a good question. Well, I guess if marital, if it's skin to skin contact in your intimate parts and it's a life risk, yeah. But I guess
an example I have.
Wrong.
Yeah. He thinks leprosy does not excuse.
Oh man.
Yeah. Go on. Wrong. I didn't mean to cut you off. No, I wanted you to know right away.
Yeah.
That you're in error on that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I need to go to confession. I have misrepresented 2,000 years of tradition. No, don't worry. I have nothing more to say. I cannot put myself in for more hot water.
Well, and it got me thinking, like, is it HIV? I mean, STDs. I mean, I would imagine they would be like, you can't say no to the marital debt even if you're going to catch an HIV, an STD. Maybe they would say HIV, since it, or at least historically, used to be lethal.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's just gonorrhea or whatever, you're just gonna. That's one of the things you put up with. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh man, that's wild. I thought for sure leprosy, especially given like, well, I mean, if we've inherited any of the Jewish tradition, and sadly, the uncleanliness of leprosy, you'd imagine that there's some kind of purity law around intimate touch with lepers. Well, I guess even if you get leprosy, Onan, your wife is in trouble. Mrs. Onan still has to pay the debt.
That's right. You heard it here. So I think I know what the answer will be, but we'll find out. If I ever have to find out, I'll let you know what she says.
Yeah. Oh, Pick and Choose is back. Oh, buddy. I think you missed a decent chunk. I hope once this goes live, and get caught up in the chat because I think there was some fun exchanges. Probably this has maybe been my, for better or for worse, maybe my most homophobic stream with Onan here.
long as YouTube doesn't ban my channel, I don't care what. I don't really care.
No worries. I'll make sure, I'll set the record straight. I do not advocate harm for our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, and I love them dearly. It's just when some gays are named Jonah 2.0 or Tim Gordon, I lose my temper a little bit.
Well, if the channel goes dark, just to go find me on Twitter, and I'll create a new one. I'll
pay reparations if your channel gets taken down.
All right. Well, this one isn't big enough that it would be more of a hassle, but I think we're going to be okay. One of the things he he's promoting the idea of couples kind of adopting continence at one point in their marriage, and I'm not saying I totally disagree with him, but I want to play this little clip and get people's sort of reactions to it.
And what can married couples look forward to as they sort of grow spiritually in this process in terms of the growth of their marriage and things like that?
Again, he's talking about adopting the continence approach once you're through your fertile I think is what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna discover a whole other dimension of yourself, probably, right? Whole other dimension of your marriage. Yeah, your spouse may have other things going on in their minds that they haven't kind of brought up in your relationship. You might really get to focus more on prayer, maybe on the apostolate in some way. You might be able to pay more attention to your children that you already have, and be able to perceive their spiritual needs better or differently. Those are some things, and I talk in the book a little bit about the gifts, and all of that kind of stuff would go along with
The gifts of the
more
Holy Spirit.
periodic continence. Yeah, and then maybe most significantly is if and when, especially women will have serious health issues that might make pregnancy very dangerous, right? If that were to befall a couple, well, you're sort of trained for that. You've disciplined yourself, you've freed yourself enough from an attachment to venial sin. Like, you can now deal with this heavy cross much better.
Okay, so I misspoke a little bit. He was talking about, adopting what they're saying is, stop having sex for pleasure, stop requesting the marital debt, except when you're trying to procreate. They're saying stop using NFP, just be making babies to procreate. Otherwise, abstain entirely from the marital act is what they're saying. And I agree. I mean, I think I'll give them credit to that point. Like, if you get to that point where like, this is one point that people make that I guess I concede their point on is, what are couples supposed to do if her life would be threatened, whatever. And I agree. Like, if my wife would literally die if we got pregnant, we probably wouldn't take our chances with NFP. Even as reliable as the Marquette is, people will say, well, the idea that you need to have NFP because life could be threatened, it doesn't make sense, because you probably wouldn't run that risk. And that's probably a fair point in his point about, developing this ability to go extended periods without it might prepare you for that. And that's probably true. But this is within the context of a scenario or problem that we've created for ourselves, right? It wouldn't have to be this way if couples had other options available to them, whether it's contraception or even other acts or solo acts or whatever the case may be. What we have to remember that, part of this scenario is because of the rules that we've created that tells couples the only valid way that you can express yourself sexually or relieve yourself sexually is through the marital act, and the marital act must be completed the right way, and it must not inhibit procreation, right? So again, this is not the only scenario that could exist. There are other options out there that we have decided, that someone has decided, are off limits. So that's why I get his point, but I think it's important to remind ourselves that, yeah, but you guys have created this problem, right? And now
Mhm.
you're saying, well, here's a better solution to this problem. Well, the problem wouldn't necessarily even need to exist, but right?
Yeah, for sure. They've painted themselves into a corner.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's really important to point that out, because I think they just, I don't know, just take for granted that it's reasonable that this, like, it's inevitable that this situation would exist. I don't think it's inevitable. It's so yeah. Let's see. He says something about, I feel like at one point, I'm not sure I can find it. He about, even if pregnancy is life threatening, like, there's something noble about, I guess, taking that chance to create souls for God. And I may be misstating him, so if I am, I'm sorry. But it was a kind of a cavalier approach to that. And I think that's a common thing amongst traditionalists, this cavalier approach to what women especially go through, both in pregnancy and delivery and in long-term child rearing, that I think just gets just treated as if it's just a non-issue. I think it is a much bigger issue, a much more significant factor that I think deserves to be, to be talked about.
Absolutely. I think, yeah. I mean, in addition to just it's a lot of emotional, physical, and mental cost to raise children.
Mhm.
And that's not even thinking the economic, like, depending what part of the country you are, those 18 years of raising one child could easily be like hundreds of thousands of dollars, just depending
Yeah.
on,
Right.
you know, education and healthcare
Right.
alone, depending on the
Right.
setup there. It's huge. And I think one of the things I'm working on for my channel, which I don't know when I'll drop it, I'm still refining the script, is that mischaracterization of the discussion around birth control is, it's not, if anything, it's not a disrespect for life, but
Mhm.
it's a
Mhm.
respect
Mhm.
for, it's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
I think most people, I'm not denying that there's, hedonism and
Mhm.
irresponsible decision making, and I'm not denying
Yeah.
the problems of hookup
Yeah.
culture. But I think most of the time, anytime I hear priests just railing against the contraceptive mindset, I can't help that. I'm sorry. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not saying the priesthood and living in the rectory or a monastery is the
Mhm.
most comfortable thing in the world, but it's like these guys don't understand the enormous responsibility of raising just one or two kids, let alone 5, 6, 7, or how many. And it's just, when people are using birth control, it's because the reality is married couples need to be intimate. I know it's a different need than eating and sleeping,
Mhm.
but for to really flourish and be your best self and to fill your cup, as you say, married couples need to be intimate.
Mhm.
But there's also this comprehension that it's an enormous responsibility, and you sort of have to be ready to not be ready for all the things that come with bringing new life.
Well, that, and I would add to that, just there is the, because John, yeah, hate to pick on John, he's not here, but he likes to say NFP just tells babies they're not wanted. I'm like, you have it all backwards, because there is an intentionality when you become pregnant with contraception. I mean, unless it's very one of those rare cases where it like truly fails, but a couple that's on contraception that says we're ready to have kids is far more intentional about that choice to have a baby. That child is wanted, if you will, more, I think, is wanted more by the couple that has used contraception, turns off the contraception, than the couple that engages because of concupiscence, like they invoke marital debt so I don't, run off and take care of it in the shower. Like, don't tell me that the child, like, if the child knew, like, if you told the child, you know what, we weren't planning to have you, but dad was real close to like blowing one in the shower, and so mom gave in and we had you and whatever. Like don't tell me that makes that child more wanted or feels more valued than the couple that, let's say, uses contraception for a year and then has a baby. Like, that's just such silly nonsense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there. I'm a lot of people in our in our faith. There are a lot of oopsies, and that's not to. It
Yeah.
has nothing to do with the child is less valuable, but
Yeah.
parents are humans, man. They get
Mhm.
spent. There's
Yeah.
just so much, and
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with they not loving the child
Yeah.
more, but it's just life is rough, and
Yeah.
and when you welcome a new child into circumstances that are already stressful, it's not a good it's not good. It's not, or it's not that it's not good. It's maybe it's not optimal. It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's people just, we have modern tools and modern science to pace ourselves accordingly. At least that's the intention. Like any tool can be abused. So birth control can certainly be abused. Other acts can theoretically be abused. So I'm not like contesting that, and I'm not trying to diminish
Mhm.
the value of raising children, but it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's tough, man, and more than anybody else
Yeah.
how tough, 9 times more than the average person,
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
tough it is.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, this is where I don't know. I, I wish I wish that the high calling of procreation was separated from the dynamics and the difficulties and the urges of sexual, our sexual desires. Like I I as much as I enjoy that aspect of my marriage with my wife, if given the chance to be like, you know what, you would never you would never experience the I don't know, the joy, the wonderment of that type of sexual relationship, but in exchange, the decision to procreate becomes very much a rational, intellectual. I don't want to make it too, but a, a decision of the will, a mutual decision of the will that we as a couple in our desire to be fruitful and bring souls to God and all that, that if child making was truly a product of our combined wills and our combined desires to be generous, and wasn't, like you said, sort of a product of whoopsies and our desires to avoid these other naughty things that we only seem naughty because the church says so or a saint says so. I would I I wish there was a better way, right? I would gladly like separate those two parts and make procreation much more of a, like I said, a product of rational, committed decision, and less about response to sexual desires. But it is what it is, and it feels to me like especially Augustine and Aquinas, and I guess to some degree, Alphonsus of Liguori, are trying to kind of, uh, shape reality to fit that goal that just isn't how life works. I don't know that it ever did. I'm skeptical that it was that way before the fall, but none of us will ever know.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I know that our resident homosexual Jonah 2.0 is always saying, "Oh, what's so unnatural about doing it the way it's always been throughout history?"
Yeah.
And I think maybe I'm sure that family life to some extent, especially in the West, in the Christian West, is always the ideal. But
Mhm.
back when information didn't travel nearly as fast or as widely, I'm sure people found whatever unorthodox
Yeah.
solutions they had. And certainly, if you consider things in the Far East, you know, um, the attitudes about how to handle these things were just very different. So I
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
it's difficult to say what was historical. We could certainly talk
Mhm.
about trends and what was more
Yeah.
common and what was
Yeah.
generally accepted, but there's a lot of stuff that just people didn't know about because we didn't have social media.
Yeah.
We didn't have Onan's Twitter polls, so we didn't know how people were
Yeah.
handling stuff.
Well, it is a little weird that we, are skeptical of our, what I say, current capacity to understand things with more information, more, I don't know, intellectual health, more, like nourishment than ever before. Like how our the products of a current well disciplined mind is somehow, less valuable or to be ignored than, let's say, the best minds of the time 2 centuries ago. Like I don't understand why someone living in the 300s or 400s was better able to make these kinds of really critical conclusions with, in the most charitable way, less information and more accurately a lot of wrong information, right? Like these
Mhm.
things developed out of, uh, superstition, not necessarily in a real pejorative way, but they didn't know. Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
look at the sky, being an ancient person looking up at the sky and marveling at thunder and lightning and trying to figure that out. Well, they were trying to make sense of stuff they really had
Yeah,
no other way to do, and that's
yeah,
fine. Let's just
yeah,
recognize it for what it is,
for sure.
instead of
Yeah.
just giving them this imprimatur, this level of authority that just doesn't seem warranted, I guess, is where.
For sure. And in a way, like, kind of when you consider just how the ancients made sense of things, as long as it's not, we don't cling to them in some kind of dogmatic sense, there's almost like a kind of beauty and poetry, and it speaks to the imagination of humans, how we try to make these stories about making sense of the weirdness, the strangeness, and the marvelousness of life. But I mean, are we not allowed to know better now that we've developed new tools, new research methods, and now we can study things across culture? And I think we need somebody. It's kind of like if this were all a software. We haven't had a software update since Aquinas.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the reality is kind of relates to a joke I made over on Twitter the other day, like how the current pope couldn't contradict a older pope. Like, I don't. It's there. Our limitations, our restrictions are because someone else reached a decision first, like came to a conclusion first, and we're sort of bound not to differ from that, right? And I think that's true. Like, I truly and honestly believe that if Thomas Aquinas, and if his mind was as brilliant as it seems like it was born into this world and had access to all the information we have now, and was sort of dealing with, I don't know, a clean slate, but whatever slate he was dealing with at that time, whatever undiscovered parts of our intellect and whatever reason he was dealing with, if he was trying to solve those problems now, I strongly think he would come to some very, very different conclusions. I hope he would. I mean, I would hope he would, because I don't know how he couldn't.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, I have to get running here. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Well, let me check my notes. I think we covered a pretty wide spectrum of that. Yeah. I'm sure. I think the conversation on that podcast was rich enough that I'm sure it'll come up in the flagship UCM show, and I'll probably come up with something on Midnight Philosopher about it, and I'm sure in another one of these streams we'll be referring to it. There's quite a lot there to sort of deconstruct. Maybe just a few, like one passing comment is I did think it was funny that he shared the objection about, like, he seemed to poke a little bit at Christopher West and saying theology of the body was hyper spiritualizing sex, and he seemed to take took the view that it's just a biological process, and it's not like you're imaging the Trinity and having this profoundly spiritual experience every time. So I thought I was kind of on the same page with him on that. I appreciate theology of the body trying to shift the tone to something more positive and celebratory, because if anything, like, the Eamonn and the host were, I wouldn't say that they were positive and celebratory about sex, but they almost took a stoic approach to it.
Oh yeah.
It's not wrong, but you have to fulfill all these conditions, but you shouldn't enjoy it too much, because pleasure for its own sake is venially sinful, but it's not bad. It's all properly ordered, So they took a kind of middle ground, a stoic approach to it. Whereas Christopher West, although, it still checks all the boxes in terms of technicalities, he's a little bit more flamboyant and theatrical and poetic, very straight. But
yeah. I mean, I think but it's weird how they, I think, make the same objection but come to a very different result, right? Like I think they correctly call out Christopher West for, like, I think we're trying to overly dramatize something that is in most respects it's just a kind of a basic natural biological process, but yet they say that, these guys say that, but then yet they still turn to, well, there's innumerable ways that you commit venial sin because of, like, you say it's a biological process, but it's still soaked in all of these moral values that you're placing upon it, that I don't think clearly follow from it. So I would just say, yeah, I agree. Like, let's treat this as more of a biological process, and then as a result, maybe that's a reason to, like, declutter a little bit all the moral stuff that goes around. Like, that would be my reaction to that, is like, okay, well, let's rethink why we look at this stuff. But no, so they kind of, I don't know. they're talking outside both sides of their mouth a little bit when they make those comments.
Yeah, 100%. But I think one last thing, I just a little kind of related to something we said earlier about children being, or no, sorry, the comment about making saints in God's army, something like that, as the purpose of marriage, of making saints. And I don't disagree with that. I think, but I think the way they go about it is that there's almost like, a factory element to it, that you're just producing kids, and something doesn't quite sit right. I haven't figured out how to state it succinctly without rambling, but that's just something I'm bringing to your attention, something to reflect on, that just treating marriage as like a kid factory, just something is a bit odd. And I think the best motivation really to have kids is, if referring, like, look at Jonah 1.0, that the joy and that he's radiating, and it's about finding a perspective or a way of life that's, I mean, there will always be hard times, that we can't avoid that, but finding a perspective of life that's peaceful and joyful and inspires a kind of generosity, so much so that you want to bring new life to celebrate with it, and hopefully you can pass some of that on. Because at least maybe I can't find it within myself. Maybe that's a personal defect, but I don't see how abiding by the system that was proposed by Eamonn, I don't see how that can fill you with a kind of joy that you want to share with the next generation, that inspires you to build something new. It's all about these technicalities and avoiding these pitfalls, and knowing all the loopholes so you can get right with God. And it takes a kind of, I think the way he approached it is almost a little bit, I think there's a little bit of overlap with like Ellen Holloway's podcast, and how she was saying that you sort of have to change what you like or what you want. There's a self brainwashing element to it that it's a little bit, I'm uneasy with it. It doesn't seem right.
I think you could be right. I despite my frustrations and whining, I mean, I do I guess remain optimistic and hopeful that there is a place for a couple to be like over the top in love with each other, and physically and sexually fulfilled and enjoy and fruitful and having children and spiritual and providing benefit to the community. Like I just think that all those things can be true and present at once. And I think to take it a step further, I think are sort of the signs of a fully lived Christian or Catholic marriage. And I don't think that those, any of those things are mutually exclusive with each other or in conflict with each other. But I think any of the others, whether it's Christopher West or these guys, I think, at some point put some of those competing interests as if they're in inherent conflict with each other. And I don't know that it has to be that way.
Yeah, well said.
So, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that went on. We had a really good crowd for this. I really appreciate everyone who listened. Of course, everyone who was in the chat. It's always fun to have that going on. And, anyone that joins in after the fact. We'll be curious to see what Ordinary Catholic's thoughts are on after
she popped in for a bit, so hopefully she chimes in, because this is not like rules for retrogrades. Women are indeed welcome. Women don't need Onan's permission to speak.
Nope, for sure. So we love the I thought this was a really good conversation. Went by very fast, and I think we have found a space that needs more of these kinds of conversations. So I look forward to continuing to do it. I think I mentioned I won't be doing it next week, probably because of my surgery, but hopefully this will make up for that a little bit, and we'll be back at it the week after. So
well, best of luck in your surgery. We should all be keeping you in our prayers.
If you got a chance on Monday, say a prayer for me and the doctor. So okay.
Happy NFP Awareness Week to everybody.
Oh yeah. Go get it. All right. Thank you, Midnight. Appreciate you. You're, as always. Thank you for everyone who showed up in the comments. And until next time, everyone. Have a good one.